Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for coming on over to Out on a Limb with Gabby Allen today. Today we have Madelyn Hill. Let me start out by saying Madelyn and I have known each other since the Reno, Nevada RWA in, I believe, 2005, where I kind of sort of plunked myself down at her table and I just never got up. So this is going to be so much fun because Madelyn is one of my very first writer friends. We have, I'm sure, a bunch to talk about, and we write very different kinds of books. So there's going to be a lot of different conversation. But as always, we will start with our very first question because it's the easiest or the hardest, depending on who you are. So, Madelyn, what is it that you do and how do you do it?
Thank you for having me, Misty. Yes, I write historical romances that are set primarily in Scotland, and I usually get started on a story by finding a little snippet of history that I find very interesting, and it kind of propels my story forward. But that's usually where I get started. I'm a pantster. So sometimes I'll just do, I just do a ton of research, get that information in my head, and then just write, like just regurgitate that out on the page. And sometimes that's okay and it goes well. And sometimes I get to like the middle of the book and I'm like, what am I doing? Is this story even going anywhere?
Now what?
Yes, now what? Like, so then I have to go back and figure out what the heck I want these characters to do. And that's probably generally when I'll pull out that goals, motivation, and conflict sheet and start writing that about my characters to help get me forward. So like the historical facts are really inspiring for me. I know what my characters are going to look like physically, and then some of their emotional traits, but that midway through the novel, I just have to do something to kind of like spur it forward. Right. And then usually that's the first book. I have a couple, I like to write. My last series was 3 books, and the second book, oh, thank you, just flew out of my mind. Like the second book, I sat down and just wrote it, and I didn't have any trouble with it. But the first and the third, I had
a little bit of issue.
Yeah.
Now that's fascinating to me. So you do this research and it just kind of sticks in your head, but like, how do you decide what to research? Like, when you say that you have, like something sparks your interest, is it like something and then you go look at Scotland in 1846?
No, so I usually start with researching clans.
Oh, okay.
And find interesting stories about different clans. So I'll start and I'll try to find like the heroine's clan that I want that heroine to be from, and learn a little bit about them. And see if there's something that I can take from the actual history and pull it into my story. And then I'll do the same. I'll make sure I research like which clans were associated as allies and which were considered their enemies. And then I'll make sure that I pick compatible clans in some cases, or maybe not compatible clans, right?
Yes. So you do well with the non-compatible. You do well with all of them. But I will say that I very much enjoy the ones where I'm like, oh, how are they ever going to get through this? I mean, I trust you. I'm not saying I don't trust you. But oh man, I mean, because there was so much going on back then. Do you worry about the specifics though? Because let's say, for instance, that you do pick 18 or 15, 14 or something. And like in 15, 16, the leadership of the country changed. Do you like narrow down what you're doing to where that wouldn't necessarily affect them right now?
Yes, I try to avoid those like bigger time frames, those like, like Culloden or, things like that, where there's definitely, I would be restricted and where I could go creatively. Right. And then you would get like people saying, oh, well, this isn't accurate. And it's not always going to be accurate. Sometimes I have to skew history in order for it to gel well with the story.
It is fiction.
Yes.
Because I'm pretty sure that the woman that you've come up with and the guy that you've come up with in his tartan they don't exist either.
Right.
So, I mean, and I don't necessarily like to always get bogged down into the details. I mean, I've read some historicals where I'm like, wow, that read a lot like a history book. And so, but yours never do. And I guess that was why I was surprised at how you do them, because I wouldn't be able to. I tried once to write a historical. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I put a jacket over her neck or something like that, where I was like, and she wore this, and that did not mean at all what I thought it meant. And I don't know how especially with Bridgerton out and about, and like there aren't 70 million dukes out there the way that
Right.
people want you to think that there are 70 million dukes out there, but it is fiction. So I just wondered, like, how do you not get caught in some of that? And because your novels never do.
Well, and like with the third book in the Wild Thistle series, it's Highland Honor.
Yes.
The hero, oh, I'm sorry, Faith. It's in Faith. I'm sorry.
I love them all. Go
And
ahead.
that's in that one, I read about a lord who had a Scottish lord who had lost his castle because he was a gambler, and he like basically had to put it up as collateral and lost it. So that is how I took that was part of the hero's conflict, because his father had done that and then hated him because of some other reasons, but that just got the story going. And then I knew that was the clan I would focus on, and I would pull bits and pieces from that. I look at, their plaid and which ones, the colors they were wearing, and the histories of the family, where they're located, in the Highlands or throughout Scotland, and just go from there.
I love it. Because there are some that feel like, well, that was a contemporary with skirts. You know what I mean? Like, I've read historicals that are like, that wasn't really a historical. The wording is not. I understand wanting to not have everybody talk exactly like they would have talked back then. I can only handle so more dinners before I'm like, why are we? I understand that he has an accent. Let's not do it throughout the entire book, because that can be distracting. But then there are others that I'm like, I'm pretty sure that they don't have that in the 1600s, and I am not very good at that kind of stuff. So if I noticed it, it's an issue. However, on the other hand, like, when you do get nailed for historical inaccuracy, to me, it's like, unless you're specifically saying my guy is fighting with Napoleon right now on this particular longitude and latitude, and he shot this gun, then you're skating around the edges of history anyway. Do you feel like that's kind of how that works for you?
Yeah, and like with the like adding in the brogue and the Scottish words and things like that, I try to pepper those in because it can get distracting, and then you're going to have to explain what that word means if it's something highly unusual. But I know, like in my Christmas Highlands anthology, I did get called out on because I said they had Christmas trees.
Oh,
but the Druids had trees that they decorated in winter solstice. And so just because there was laws against celebrating Christmas in the Highlands doesn't mean that the Highlanders obeyed those laws. They did a lot of things against English rule, right?
Yes.
So, and I took creative license, and I guess I probably should have put a disclaimer in the front of it, because that's something that people are like, they didn't celebrate Christmas. And I'm like, but I found this little snippet of history and this little snippet from here. And, I decided, okay, I'm going to take some leeway with it.
Yeah.
And it added to the story. And to me, it made it appropriate for the story.
Yeah. Well, and I'm killing people in towns that exist.
Right.
Especially now with the Gabby Allen thing, like the Tally Graver mystery series, which are under the Misty Simon, which is my real name, just in case anybody's wondering. Yes, my mom liked Led Zeppelin. Figure that one out. But I don't name the town, but if I would, it's the one that I live in. And I'm pretty sure that not everybody would be excited about me putting a corpse out in their backyard. But the new ones, they're set in Avalon on Catalina Island, because there's 2 towns on that entire island. I can't do much more. Like I can't add a 3rd town, a fictional one, because you lose the ambiance of the island itself. And so I think, like, honestly, I like a lot of historicals, but I love that yours place me in there, but they're kind of fringe, so that I am enjoying the story so much and everything feels authentic. Whether or not it is, it doesn't matter to me.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like what you said before about it not being a history book. Yeah. Right. I'm writing a romance.
Yes.
And that should be the core element, not the historical detail. That should flavor it. That's like a condiment, right? So
yes,
you have
Yay! It's ketchup.
So it's like,
or Worcestershire sauce, however you say that. Horseradish.
So it's like what you want to focus on is getting these 2 people together, right? And through their goals, motivations, their internal conflict, their external conflict, whatever, you want them to get together. So, but you have to set that stage, that ambiance, where I feel like that's where I bring in the historical characteristics and
absolutely
ideas and things like that.
Well, and I love in historicals, one of the things that have always really drawn me to them, and I've always wanted to write, is like an ankle is sexy.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, he just kissed the inside of her wrist and you have fallen over in a dead faint of whoo, whoo, whoo. Whereas with more contemporary, people expect more reality out of that. And like the skirt has to be short, or there has to be like a flash of an entire leg, as opposed to like, to cover yourself up, lassie, because like nobody wants to see your bare shoulders. And so I find that interesting in that particular kind of book, is like the difference between us and them. And going back to what may have been a more gentler time as far as like what was attractive, and yet a far more brutal time as far as what they were doing outside of the castle, even in the castle sometimes.
Right. And I try to, I feel like the political temperature or the climate of that whole time period that I write in it's just so complex.
Yes.
And I don't think that people are reading my books to learn about the politics in Scotland and in Great Britain, right? So I try not to, like, I hint at it.
Yeah.
And I try to, pull it in a little bit there, but I don't like dwell on it as much as some other historical writers do, and do very well.
Absolutely.
So,
and I think, different people do things really well. And like I said, I remember reading one, I don't remember who it was by. I do know it was a Regency, and it had to do with like coming back from a war and stuff like that. Now that is germane to your story then. Like that, it's an integral part of your story. You couldn't really do Braveheart without talking about, what he's doing. But if you were doing Braveheart is just his name, and it's his story of falling in love with that girl, and it doesn't end as horrendously as it did. But if you were just telling that particular story, you wouldn't need to have all of that stuff, unless they're like, the Clan 3, what clicks over, whatever the distance measuring is, they are having some issues, we might want to brace ourselves, blah, like that's the whole thing. You don't need to, unless you're going to make it about sending the boys off to war. Like King Arthur is a great movie with Clive Owens, and the whole point is that they would come through and take all of these young boys, and they were conscripted for X amount of years, and then they had to be released. And so as they were falling in love and making lives, that's different. But what you do is much more about like watching them struggle through the stuff. And you pick some pretty fun things for them to go through. I'm like, oh my goodness. So do you ever worry though with this amount of series that you have that you've done like extra, like have you done more than one with the same issues?
I try not to. I feel that sometimes there are words that I might tend to overuse. So I got in the habit of saying, okay, so this character, this is going to be like her go-to expression.
Okay.
And so I keep it unique to that particular character. Like in Highland Faith, she said reckon a lot. Like I don't, so, but then in the other, book, it was a different phrase for the character that they use a lot. And I try to not keep the brogue the same way between the books, even though they're the same series. I would, try to highlight, excuse me, different things like that. And then they also were very vastly different characters. So that helped direct, their goals, motivation, and conflict and keep their identities pretty strong between each book.
Well, and I mean, you have to do that. Even in the books that I write, since I am writing first person and it's the same lead character in every single book, I still have to have different personalities. You don't want to write the same book 700 times. And like, I can't always kill people the same way, but I can use a knife in several different ways. You can use a clan chief that's been dishonored in several different ways. It doesn't have to be for the exact same reason. It doesn't have to be in the exact same way, the exact same age, whatever. So you can play with that kind of stuff. Do you feel?
I think so. And I think that, I think you're right. Like with your books, I don't feel like they're carbon copies. Each one of them is unique, even though they're part of a series and it's the same lead character, but the situation is so different that it really makes them stand out. You don't have to read the whole series. You could pick up one and you wouldn't be lost in the characterization and things like that. So it's very funny too. So
well, thank you. But I think you could in yours too. And we're just going to have a moment of mutual admiration society here. Go get yourself a beverage. We'll be right back. But I mean, yours are the same way. That it makes sense to me. It made sense to me to read them in order, but if I had not, I don't think I would have lost a whole lot by reading them out of order, because you brought them in. So like, do you plan out your series pretty much from the beginning? Even though I know you're a pantser, do you kind of know what you're aiming for, or do you start with the first one and then you just are like, whatever happens, babe?
So with the Wild Thistle series, I was in the shower and I got
as
inspiration.
You do.
And I got this line that said, through hope, faith, and honor, ye can rule. And that's like, okay, that's going to be like this tagline for this series. And there's going to be 3 girls and their names are going to be hope, faith, and honor. And I was, I wanted them all to be strong female characters, but have some vulnerabilities. And even though like Honor, who's the book 3, is really a softer, gentler woman, she still has this strength that she didn't know she had that comes out at the end. But I feel like when I started writing the first one, sometimes what happens to me, which is not great, is my mind moves to book 2.
Oh,
because I start getting flashes like, oh, I've got to do this in book 2. Oh, I've got to do this in book, and so right now I've been starting a new series for a while, the pandemic, that like made everything wonky. So I have started a new series and I'm like on the first book, But then I'm like, well, I got to figure out which characters are going to lead the second book. And then I'm like, well, what are those characters going to do? And then I'm like, oh my gosh, now my mind's jumping to book 2 when
Yeah.
I need to stay firmly rooted in book 1 so I can
Yeah.
get it finished and then I can
Right.
start. So I'm
Right.
constantly using Surrey and saying Surrey, and I'm like texting myself notes for book 2 so I don't lose it.
I love
And
it.
it's just crazy. And the same thing with, because I have started writing some contemporary, and I had written contemporary before. I have not been published in contemporary, but I
Okay.
have a series started, and again, I'm in book 1 and my mind is going to book 2 because I'm
Yes.
like, oh, that would be perfect for that character. I
Yes.
got to write this in. And so because I'm getting older, I have to write everything down because my memory is like,
We don't talk about age here, Madeline. Nobody knows how old we are. We look stunning. We'll
yes,
leave it at that.
vulnerable gowns.
I totally understand though. However, I will say, in your brain's defense, if you don't have some idea of what you're doing in book 2, you could very easily write yourself into a corner in book 1 where now you can't do that in book 2.
Right.
I have done that before. The Ivy Morris series, which would have been when we met.
Yeah.
A long time ago, not talking years, not doing it. But I mean, there were certain things that I said in book 1 that in book 3, I was like, oh, I totally cut that avenue off for myself. Like I can't do that because in book 1 and book 2, she doesn't do that. I can't, and they're already out. So it's not even like,
right, you can't go back and
I
put it
can't
in.
change it. Now that might be more of an issue because it's the same character over and over again. But if you make a specific set of rules or whatever for this particular castle and this particular clan, and you're going to have like 3 brothers or 3 sisters, there are some things that if you can figure them out early, maybe you won't mess with yourself later on. Second of all, if you're in the shower, they make shower crayons, right?
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to get some of those.
You have to
That would be
go.
awesome.
Yes. So I'm not plugging any particular store. I will say that I got mine at one that could be said as Target if you're saying it's slightly different than, yeah. So you can take your little crayons and you put them in your shower. And then when the idea comes, you just start scribbling all over the shower.
Yeah.
Then you take your phone and you take a picture and then you can clean it off. But
so that is when I get the most inspiration, shower or driving.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes.
So it's like I find like, yes, it's like, come on. So I'm constantly clicking on my, I can get to my phone. I'm like, hey Siri, text me. But I call myself Queen Madelyn on my phone. But
I love it. I think we should all do things like that. Why not?
But it's like, you're right when you say that about you could write yourself out of a second book. And I do a lot of like pre-research, and I'll jot notes at the beginning of a manuscript, and I'll have the person's name, maybe what they look like. Yeah. Especially with the secondary characters, because I would need to have these secondary characters in the first book. They can't, depending on the story, they can't just pop up in the second book, right? So yeah.
Yeah, they kind of have to be, especially if you're writing a series. Like for my series, because I know I'm going to have like that main brick of characters is going to travel. I don't necessarily have to do that in the same way. In book 1, you do not need to meet the person who's going to die in book 2. But when you're writing a series, to me, at least as my expectation as a reader, if you've got some connection that makes it a series, I sure would like to kind of know that they exist before they exist. Like I'd like to know, oh, hey, as you're walking past the guy at like the pizza place, and give me a hint of who he is, because then that's what makes me pick up book 2.
Right.
Because I'm like, oh, Joe is book 2. Oh my God. You know what I mean? And so then you want book 2, or if the sister 1 does something and then sister 2 has this kind of response to that, knowing that Sister 2 is book 2 is like, oh, okay. So who are
Yeah.
you to pit her against?
Yeah.
I mean, and I know that, people read to be involved. I know
Yes.
they read to escape, but especially in series, I know my one thing is that I want to go back and visit my favorite people.
Right. Right. And I think it was really hard to end that series. And I,
Oh,
I think that's why I like series, because you
yes,
get to revisit and continue that story.
yes.
In the one I'm working on now, it's like Rogues of the Highlands,
Ooh,
and they're all based loosely on Shakespearean themes. So the first one is Much Ado About a Highlander,
I
and
love
then
it.
I have some other ones that I'm, using different, like A Midsummer Nights in the Highlands, and that
Yes,
idea. So I'm
yes.
using those loosely, using
Ah,
those themes. I don't want anybody to attack me.
no, hey, we're in the exact same boat because the Gabby Allen books, the first one is Much Ado About Nauticaling.
Uh-huh.
And then the second one is Something Fishy This Way Comes.
Oh
And
yeah.
the third one, I think, is going to be called The Taming of the Crew. And so I mean, it's neat to use like a phrase that people know, even if they've never
Right.
studied Shakespeare. Most likely you have heard one. And
Right.
so, I mean, I enjoy titles like that because they intrigue me before I even have
Yeah.
a chance to read the back.
Right. Right. And those are very funny.
Yeah. Oh,
Those are
thanks.
great titles.
I love titles. Titles are
Uh,
my favorite ever. But with a Highland book, you're gonna have a different twist on the titles because
Right.
there's a I oh what was the I saw a title the other day. It was like 7 words long and it was like the Highlanders accidental something something something, and I was like, wow, is that the synopsis as the title? Because I don't know if I need to read the back now because I already know all the tropes. Do you
Right.
so then that kind of thing? So you have like your characters at the beginning, and I have so to in all honesty and to be fair with the people who are listening, I have also critiqued Madelyn's book, so I have seen the pages of notes at the beginning.
Notes.
So I'm
It
aware of
is.
what that is. But do you like when you're looking, you had said earlier that you like the GMC is kind of a middle book thing that you do, but you do know what their emotional kind of stuff is at the beginning. Do you ever try to like deliberately put tropes in there? Like second chances, secret babies, or do you
Um,
just kind of roll with what their emotions and if there is a
I
trope?
have had, yes. I don't know if I do it purposely. It just
Okay.
happened,
I can't. I
Yeah.
can't do it
I think it
purposely.
just,
That's
yeah.
why I ask. I'm always fascinated if other people can do stuff that I can't. I will I'll make a point to ask about it because that's just not my thing.
Yeah, I feel like I think that's too much pre-planning for me. I think
Okay.
that it has to come organically through the
Okay.
writing process, and then,
Got you.
it's um and shifting, sometimes I might shift a little bit, but
Okay.
never that planned out. And
Okay.
I like to keep, I have files with notes and images and things like that when I'm doing my research. But then there's like that stuff I put at the beginning of the manuscript that has links that I'm going to be visiting a lot because I
Yeah.
can't remember, like, okay, what was this and what was that? And,
No.
especially when you want a character to have a certain expertise, you're
Yes.
going to need to have some of those resources right at your fingertips. And I
Right.
put a lot of images, and I make Pinterest boards just with images
Oh,
um, that help
that's
me
fun.
craft what my characters look like. Yeah.
See, now I'm pretty sure that I would get stuck in the Pinterest hole for like 749 years because I would be like, look at how cute that is. Oh, and that.
It,
Oh,
it, it is,
and that. And that.
it is a
That's
rabbit
cute.
hole for sure. And sometimes too, though, if I need inspiration, I'll go
Oh,
there and I'm like, oh, right. This is what I envisioned for this or that, type of.
okay. Okay. So what you're working on now, is that also a one of three?
The historical one is probably going to be more than 3. I think
Oh,
it might
okay.
be 4 or 5. It all just
Ooh.
depends on if I ever get the first book finished. It's been a slow road.
I got you.
My day job was very demanding during the pandemic, and
Yes.
I could not face the computer after being on the computer 12 hours a day.
Totally, totally,
So,
totally understand.
yeah.
It's a rough one. I think there are some people who got super, super creative.
Mhm.
There are some people who got burned out from being in their own head for too long. And then there are some people who have been plugging along as best they can. And I don't think there's any wrong way to do it, but
Yeah.
I think, that also as things start opening or being different or whatever, we're kind of, it's almost like we're on the little engine that could, or back at the
Yeah.
bottom of the mountain. And it's like, I think I can. I'm not quite sure if I can, but I think I can. I'm not on the other side where I knew I could, but I'm climbing. I'm climbing. And, a lot of people read for escape. And,
Yes.
and I think, we also sometimes write for the exact same thing.
Right. Right. And another thing that happened is that this contemporary story came into my mind. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, where did this come from? And so I had to start writing
Yeah.
and thinking about it. So I definitely a 3-book story, but maybe
Okay.
3 and a little one, like a
All right.
shorter story. But it's something that it came into my head, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I started doing the research for it. I picked a fictional area, an area of the United States that I love, and it's percolating still, a lot of it, but
Not a
that's the
problem.
one. The second book is notes are on my phone. I'll look at it at a later time. Hopefully my phone doesn't
Oh, that would
die.
suck.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought
Yes.
about that. Ooh, that
Yeah.
would be horrendous. You're like,
Yeah.
Siri, quickly send me everything to my computer so that I don't lose it all, because then I'll be sad. Oh my gosh, do you ever lose something and you're like, I'll never ever create it like it was supposed to be again?
Actually, for the contemporary series, I did a lot of notes, and I wrote the opening scene, and then
Okay.
I couldn't find the file. And I'm usually pretty,
Oh,
um, I'm, I love technology, so I'm very, very organized with my files. So I'm like, I
right.
don't understand where it could be. And
Oh,
I searched every computer, every folder, and it was
oh,
gone. So I had to
oh.
recreate it. And I'm sure it's not as good as it was the first time.
Although I did have that happen once, and I will tell you this: mine the second time was 1,000 times better than the first time.
Okay.
So that it is very possible to be able to do that, and maybe you'll. And then I found the file, and I was like, "Ooh,
Oh, okay.
thank God I didn't use that." I don't know why you thought that was so awesome. Sometimes we talk ourselves into it because it's like,
Right.
surely it must be amazing. I wrote it, which is not true. I'm just totally messing with you. And we have officially moved into the time. So I'm going to try, because I've had you on Zoom for almost 3 hours. So I'm going to try really hard to do this the right way. So we heard about Much Ado About a Highlander. Is that next, do you think? Like, as far as what we can expect from you after we read, after you all go by all of her backlist and read it, because you should. Is that what you hope to have out next, or are you kind of playing with stuff?
Yeah, I definitely think that will be the next series that is out. And
Okay.
I probably will wait to send it to my publisher until I'm almost well done with book 2. Because I know I don't like to wait for the next book in the series to come out. So
Yes.
I want to make sure that I'm, almost done with book 2 when I send
Yeah.
in book 1. So there's not a big gap in between
Yeah.
books. And
Yeah.
then just start cranking out the other ones.
Right.
So that's definitely the one that I should be focusing on, and I'm trying to focus on.
Okay. The one I should be focusing on. However, I wrote this shiny new idea over here and it's amazing. Go buy that instead.
It's like
Seriously.
eventually.
Sometimes you have to be led by what is calling you.
Right.
And I when you have an established relationship with a publisher the way you do and the way that I do, there is a certain level of expectation of things, hopefully
Right.
within a timely manner, so that your momentum can. But then sometimes life happens, and
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with. I don't know. There was a period there. It still exists to some extent, where it was like get a book out a month, because they're going to forget about
Wow.
you. If you
Yeah.
don't have a book out a month, they're going to.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Here's the thing. Then forget about me. You'll find me again later, because
Right.
I couldn't. I tried to do that. This last year, I was putting out a novella every other month. That
Wow.
wasn't as bad because it was like 20,000 words every other month. But even then, I was exhausted. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what? How do you even advertise these? Because by the time one is out and you're advertising, you're immediately jumping into the next one, and
Right.
there's no break. And there's like, I felt like I should get out there with my cane and start, doing a dance because
Oh, yeah. And it's like you've
what?
got life, you've got your day
Right,
job, and you've got your family.
right,
It's
right.
like it's yeah.
But I think that if people really like your writing, that they'll be excited when they see your name again.
Right.
And there are a lot of places now like BookBub,
Yes.
and Goodreads
Yeah.
and Amazon, who will let you know, hey, by the way, Madeline Hill's new book is out,
Right.
if the reader follows you. And
Right.
so I encourage people to do that, because like the next Gabby Allen book's not coming out until next July. I have
Oh,
nothing to do
yeah.
with that. That has
Right. Right.
that has nothing to. I turned it in like a year and a half ago, and they do it when they're going to do it. But even if I could choose it, I still feel like it wouldn't have been on top of each other.
Right.
I need some space in there too. So
Right.
all
Right.
right, so then tell us your website and where can we find you. And the links will also be down in the description box, just for anybody, so you don't have to pull your car over and start writing or talk to Siri.
So, my website is www.madelynhill.com.
Okay,
And I'm also on Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, and Facebook.
awesome.
So you can find me on all of those as well. I really am a big fan of Instagram.
It is
Um,
fun.
it is my go-to, I think,
Yeah.
but it's just easy
Oh
to
yeah,
add to and to look at everybody else, all the other authors that I follow on there, So
absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So like I said, all those will be in the description box. I'm going to put the offer out. If you have any questions for myself or Madeline, put them in the comments section. I know that not everybody does that. I'm also fine with you emailing them to me, which is what seems to happen instead, which is fine. But the comments section allows other people to get the answers too. So if you want to put them in the comment section, I'll make sure that Madeline sees them, because if you want to learn, we want to point you in the right direction. And this has been so much fun. I
it has
am
been.
so
I'm so
happy.
glad.
Good. I'm so happy that you were available. I'm so happy that we got on the same, on the same day. And I
Yes.
would love to have you back any other time. Plus, when you have a new book out and stuff, I would love to have
Awesome.
you back. We'll do some more chatting and
I would love that.
great time, because how can it not be?
Thank you. I'm so glad we finally got it.
I
We were
know.
going to meet. Had a few obstacles along the way.
That's okay. It happens. No big deal. But thank you again for being here, and thank you everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed today, and I'll see you next time. I hope you have an amazing evening or morning or 3 a.m. Whenever you happen to be listening to this, enjoy any time that comes after it. And we'll see you next time.